All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Great, wonderful, perfect? Good. Let's go ahead and get started. We're in chapter 4. We're going to be going over week 4 content tonight. Everybody get the pen in? Or somebody still working on that?
Yes.
Okay, let me talk about Thursday while we're getting the pen. Thursday we'll be doing a IP spoofing, or take it back, MAC address spoofing lab on Thursday. Part of the content we'll be covering tonight's on malicious activity on the network, one of them being spoofing IP and MAC addresses. I believe next week's lab is a man-in-the-middle attack. The one I told you about the first week in class, I believe, on the Facebook, setting up a rogue network, hackers setting up rogue networks to steal account information. And when you guys come in that night, you'll be able to log into facebook.com, but it'll actually redirect to the man-in-the-middle machine. You'll attempt to log in with fake username and passwords, and then when the lab's finished, you'll come to the machine in the room that is the attack machine and see all the username and passwords you entered in a database. And so we'll show you how that works with software that hackers use called Canine Enable or Cane Enable, and how to thwart against it from a network perspective, and where you mostly see the man-in-the-middle attacks occur and why. Okay, and it doesn't happen everywhere, but they're targeted areas. So everybody get the pin in? Okay. Let's go to the homework for this week. You've got your review questions. We're going quiz as always, and then the week 4 lab should have a document in there on spoofing. The other documents below. Last week I believe we did the Wireshark. That one's in here as well. Sniffer's another one that's in here. We'll be doing a spoofing lab. And then access point spoofing we'll talk about. And the SMAC20 is another software that can be used for spoofing we'll talk about as well. But these are all applications you can definitely download and play with. One of the things I do want to make mention on some of these softwares we'll be using, not this week really, but next week when we use the Canine Enable or the Cane Enable software, it will generally be red flagged by the antivirus software as a virus or malware or whatever. So you'll more likely have to turn off, if you try this at home and try to duplicate the lab at home, you'll probably disable your antivirus for 10 minutes or something while you're playing with it. So trying to think of what else. I think that's about it. So let's go ahead and get to the discussion questions on chapter 4 on vulnerabilities and attacks. You're going to look at some of the vulnerabilities on network, list the type of attacks and how people attack them, the different methods. Because really it's the same attacks over and over again, but the different methods are applied each and every year, each and every month sometimes. So there's 2 broad attacks that happen and can occur on a network and can attack vulnerabilities. One is those based on network transport media like Cat5 cable being exposed in a building to where hackers can come up to a port in a room or in a hallway and plug in and connect to the network. So transport media is one, and then the other is through network devices themselves, where they can basically connect to a device on the network. Maybe it's a public machine, maybe it's a public entry point, and they're able to connect into it. It might be a router, it might be a switch they can connect to as well, or a Wi-Fi router. Media-based attacks basically happen, or media-based vulnerabilities are generally thwarted by monitoring traffic. We learned by using the software last week, Wireshark, how you can monitor traffic. Maybe some of you had some opportunity the last week to do that, some more. But helps identify and troubleshoot network problems. And then also monitoring traffic can be done in 2 ways. using a switch with what's called port mirroring, which it mirrors a port and onto another machine to see the activity, what's going in, what's going out. It redirects traffic on all the ports, or you can designate a port, like say port 21 or port 25 or port 110 for email. You can install what's called a network tap into the network, like a test access point. It's a separate device, can be installed between two network devices, such as a router, switch, or hub, or firewall to monitor traffic. One of the popular things network admins will do as well is they'll set up what's called a honeypot system you'll learn about this semester, where you basically set up a machine that is totally open for everything. And it's primed for hackers to, and software that look for holes in networks to go to because it's all open. All the ports are open. It's got no firewall on it. And it's purposely designed to trap in traffic that's malicious in nature. Okay? If they get through the doors and get into this honeypot machine, then they can trap the IP address and be able to trace it down quicker. Because they generally aren't afraid, and so they stay in there, and while they're in there, that's when they can get their IP address traced. And on honeypot networks, you really can't do any damage because it doesn't connect itself to any productivity network. So here we have a monitoring port or monitoring computer. You could say it's a honeypot computer, as I just mentioned, the honeypot system. An old computer you have lying around doesn't have to do anything fancy. It can be running Linux, it could be running old Windows software, whatever. But notice it has a mirroring port that goes directly to a computer, and that mirroring computer, that monitoring computer, monitors all the traffic coming in and out of that network at all times, 100%. It's dedicated just to do that. That's all it does. Generally on honeypot systems, they don't do anything but just that. Every once in a while, you'll remote into them to see what's going on, but it generally doesn't have a keyboard, mouse, or monitor connected to the machine. Okay, just use remote control software to get access. Most of these softwares that are in the honeypot monitoring computers have reporting mechanisms where they'll PDF a file to an admin, however they want it done, maybe once a week, once a day, or just peak alerts of some type. Say somebody's downloading a movie that they shouldn't be, or somebody's installing software they shouldn't be, whatever, something like that. Okay, and you can get programs that actually will trigger all these events I just mentioned. And some are free, some you can develop yourself, and some are hardware systems like Barracuda that have a lot of that stuff built in. This is just a screenshot of kind of like we did last week when we looked at Wireshark and all the source and destinations. We clicked on each one, and you could see more data packets. I believe last week we looked at the data packet for browsing and HTTP, which gives, I think it was a file download from an EDU site, I believe, and determining how long it took, determining what ports it came through, what the destination IP address, source IP address was. And that's beneficial because you can isolate any one of these IP addresses. You can isolate any one of them, and then you can trigger that as a trigger in, say, Wireshark to only run this IP address all day long. You want to isolate it. You see some activity between 5 p.m. and 6 a.m. on these few machines, or maybe one machine. You can run this type of software to do that. Also, in the past, what we've done as well in areas I've worked at in IT with security is set up hidden cameras in those areas as well, where we know the computers are located that have these IP addresses, like on a cart, and just have a hidden computer, or pinhole, like a real popular one we used to use was pinhole cameras that fit into electrical outlet boxes on the wall or by elevators, and they were hidden in the room where you couldn't see them. And then basically between 5 p.m. and 6 a.m. we would record everything, and then come in that morning and just forward fast to see if we've seen anybody hitting that machine. And usually, 9 times out of 10, it was usually a maintenance worker that was trying to get online or getting online to do whatever. Sometimes it was malicious, but most of the time it wasn't. It was just they're checking their email or whatever. But we just knew there wasn't anybody working at that time. So more than likely they would be asked, did you go on this computer? If they admitted to it, we would just say, you cannot do that. I don't know if you knew that or not, but you can't do that. If they lied and said they didn't go on it, they're immediately terminated, and that company was immediately terminated as well. And so that's how we did it. So we gave them a shot to be honest and admit to it or whatever. But that was one way to use this type of software plus video software or video hardware. And I'm sure that was 15 years ago, no, 20 years ago we did that. So now they've got technology that's just crazy compared to what we had then. You know, like one of the cameras I remember we purchased was like $1,500 for a pinhole camera back then. Now you could probably get it for, I don't know, $100 or something, $50 probably, I don't know. But, you know, much cheaper than what we could back then. And so this type of software definitely will help you. Media-based vulnerabilities, you've got your a tap basically on a computer network, a network tap. Network tap would be like Barracuda, okay? Barracuda is a network tap device. It filters email, web traffic. It can even filter programs that are running on a machine and determine whether or not a user is running a program. And if they are running a program, they shouldn't be running it. It can shut that program down, alert an admin immediately, and lock the machine. Or shut all ports down to where they can't do any activity on the web. So a number of things you can do. Some intrusives, some not so much, some warnings, some no warnings, just complete takeover of the machine. Again, it just depends on the severity of the action. What are some severe actions you could think of where you'd want to shut down all ports on that machine, lock down all access to that machine? I'm talking, you know, CD-ROM drive, USB drive, port. What kind of activity do you think you're talking about here that you just right off the top of your head, maybe? We don't know. Maybe, yeah, maybe trying to access bank account information possibly, but let's go more malicious in nature maybe. What can you think of maybe malicious in nature that you would say would need to be stopped immediately? A worm, yeah, definitely. Say Barracuda recognized a worm was on the machine or a virus was on the machine that could infiltrate the entire network, you shut that port down immediately. And then the reason they do that is to isolate and quarantine it, because a lot of times the user doesn't even know they have it, more than likely. And they might, more than likely, in my experience, have not been doing anything malicious. They maybe went to a website, clicked on a link or something, closed it out because some pop-up came up, and that's what installed the whatever it was, okay? But Barracuda would be a technical network tap, an example of a network tap. There's other devices, but this is probably the most popular. And then it has a monitoring computer to it, but Barracuda has its own built-in web server in the device, which a lot of these network taps do, to where you can basically browse into the device to see what's going on and do configurations and all that good stuff. And it's pretty popular, probably the most popular when it comes to network tap type of devices. So just as a network tap and protocol analyzers can be used for legitimate purposes, guess what? They can also be used for evil. Okay, and all the hackers do have these devices. Some will use a semester and show you how some are software based. Most of them are software based, but some are hardware based as well. An example of a hardware based one will say they found a closet in a building that was open that was exposed to an Ethernet cable somewhere in that closet, and they could glom onto that Ethernet cable. With maybe, say, a rogue Wi-Fi access point that would give them access to that network after hours because they have a rogue hidden access point in a closet connected to the Ethernet port of that access point. And so after hours, they can then browse in. It's got maybe a hidden SSID where it's not going to be easily found, maybe a real low-end wireless router, not a real high-end one. So maybe like a B or a G wireless routers, some of the older ones. The reason they do that is all the newer technologies and softwares that monitor wireless traffic, monitor end traffic, just so you know. If you're a business buying new software or new hardware to determine what Wi-Fi traffic do I have in my building, both rogue and valid, it generally targets only end networks by default, unless the admin goes in and sets it differently. So if they have a B Wi-Fi router running, let's say like 5 years old or whatever, it's generally under the radar. It's not even recognized if someone was to come around and to do some type of port scan. Attackers can access a wired network through false ceilings, exposing wiring, like I mentioned, in a closet, or unprotected RJ45 jacks. Now, when you leave tonight, if you go downstairs, leave out this side of the building instead of the middle, over by, it's literally this side of the building over here, has a whole bunch of RJ45 jacks against the wall. You'll notice locks in the jacks, the individual ports, and they're real inexpensive to get, but a real easy way to secure a port that maybe you don't want to block on the server, the switch end. You want to still keep it open for, say, when they have a conference down there and they want to keep it open, you just unlock it and people can get to it. So that's one way to block access. So, but it's surprising though how many areas, how many companies have all of these right here. A false ceiling. Now here in this building we have our wires run under the floor in most buildings on campus. This is how it was built. And then between building and building, the wires run in a tunnel big enough to drive a golf cart through. The fiber optic cables run between building to building. And yeah, there is guys, that's all they do is work in the tunnels. They're literally tunnel people. They just work down there all the time. That's all they do. I never see them, no. You get to see them every once in a while. But they do drive once a year, they paint it, and they literally have their paint on the little back end of their little golf cart and go through and paint the tunnel once a year. But it was, built originally before Wi-Fi hit, before a wired network, purpose was for security purposes, for if there was a tornado, for whatever, for escape purposes, for employees and students and things like that. Maybe at one point, I'm guessing a bomb threat, possibly, because our campus is old enough to way back when, where campuses and residents built bomb shelters. So more than likely that was a thought as well. So false ceilings are real popular, exposed wiring, and these unprotected jacks can cause a lot of vulnerabilities. So one of the things, the thing we'll be doing Thursday is we'll land on that one, the MAC address. Let's start with switch flooding. Switch flooding is basically where an attacker goes into a switch, and what they do is they fake it out with a fake MAC address, a spoof a MAC address, a valid MAC address on the network, and they say it's on their machine, and spoof it out to where the network thinks they're that MAC address. And then they make the switch act like a hub, sending all the packets to the device, and that's called switch flooding, to where the device itself becomes a switch. The laptop becomes a switch. Then MAC address impersonation. The attacker with device X can pretend to be device A by sending device A's MAC address to the switch as if it were its own address and be doing malicious activity on that MAC address. And as you could tell last week, it's not real hard or difficult to find a valid MAC address using software like Wireshark. It gives you everything. It gives you IP address and MAC address of all the local IP addresses. So you find one, use some software. We're going to use this Thursday to spoof it. The other one is network redirect, fake network redirect. If computers are on a different logical network segment, device A must send its request to talk to device B through a router. And an attacker on a man-in-the-middle device, a device X, can send a fake network redirect to device A, claiming it should send device B's packet to device X. So again, a man-in-the-middle type of attack. And they don't know any different. Just like Thursday, if I wasn't to tell you what what's going to happen on Thursday, you just come in, I say go to Facebook, log into Facebook. It looks just like Facebook, you log into it, and I've got your passwords. Okay? Now granted, I'll give you some tips Thursday of some things you can watch for, especially on man-in-the-middle attacks, because generally it's hackers, when they create these, they're a little bit off on stuff. And I'll just give you one hint. We'll talk more Thursday about it. Spelling's a big one. Spelling's a big one. Misspelling, gross misspellings. Okay? So instead of maybe saying copyright 2013, it says copyright 2001. Okay, well, number one, copyright spelled wrong. Facebook wouldn't do that. Number two, Facebook's not going to have a copyright of 2001. Even if they spell copyright, copyrat, or whatever. It's not going to be 2001, okay? And so generally misspellings is a big sign. Then router advertisements, because routers routinely send advertisements all the time, not routinely, they do it all the time, to see if you're present. Like right now, the routers know you guys are live, you're online, you're connected, your computer's connected, it's listening. So because routers do that all the time, an attacker could pretend to be a router, send a false router advertisement so all devices would send packets to that attacker's device. And one of the things that's called is ARP poisoning. We'll talk about that Thursday as well. ARP poisoning, where you basically overwrite the ARP table of that network. Hackers will overwrite it to tell the switch, hey, guess what? I'm the new server, or I am the server, and start sending all activity to that machine. And so you'll be able to see with some software every bit of activity on that network, including text that people are typing in, and maybe an email. You can also see passwords as they come through. So say they're logging into Eagle, they can see their username and password come through. And it keeps track of all of these and stores them. And so hackers can literally put these rogue accounts or these middle attacks on for just minutes, all right, and then leave. They don't have to mess with anything, just turn it off. Once they turn it off and put the ARP table back, everything's back to normal, and probably before the network administrators realize what's happened, okay? And then they take that information and then, 90% of it probably not gonna be able to do anything with, but that 10% might have in it such things like administrator username and password of the network. That's a big one. Also keys to security, maybe in Wi-Fi routers. So just a couple examples. Then a fake redirect. An attacker can pretend to be a valid network device by sending a fake device redirect to the switch. So that's just a number of media-based attacks. Then here are some network device vulnerabilities. Well, this is a bit no-brainer, but weak passwords. The number one reason why networks, let's use websites, are hacked into is because of weak passwords. The administrator weak password might be admin. A password is a secret combination. You guys know that. But one of the things that you might not know is there's a term called password paradox. And basically what that is a very lengthy, complex password that should be used and should never be written down. Very difficult or impossible to memorize these passwords. An example of one of these passwords is this. Say you have a Wi-Fi access point that needs a crazy password. You basically type in Notepad, I know a student that would just hit his keys with his palm of his hand, put it in a Notepad document, save it as a text file, and that was the key that he used for his Wi-Fi access password. And just pasted it into each one of the machines that he had in his network. And that worked. You didn't need to memorize it, and it was on a file, but it was secured and backed up, and that file was password protected, but they need to be almost impossible to memorize. They're so long and ugly. So alphanumeric symbols for sure, longer than 15 characters, or at least 15 characters. Minimum would probably be 13 characters. Passwords can be set to expire after a set period of time, and new ones must be created. Now, is it hard to remember passwords, or if you have a lot of them? It is. But there are softwares that you can buy. One I mentioned in here on the KeyPass is one, Key One, Password One is one, where it stores your passwords on a database basically that you have access to. You can email it to yourself. You can encrypt it. You can keep it on a USB drive and encrypt it. And the reason for that is, a password's got to be pretty difficult or near impossible to remember if you can't even fathom remembering it because it's so crazy. Okay, that's the kind of password you want. Okay, and then basically you can, like the student I mentioned, what he did was, and I've actually done this before too, is take it and just copy and paste it from a notepad document into that password field, and there you got your password. Okay, so you don't have to remember, you don't have to type it in. And also if you're copying and pasting passwords into a text box, key logging, if there was a keylogger on that machine, it wouldn't recognize it because you're pasting instead of typing. So that's another security pass there. All right. Weak password characteristic, dictionary words, not changing a password unless forced to do so. Now granted, we all have, and I recommend having, a free email account that you could care less if everybody gets into. It's not going to really do anything. It has nothing personal about you. You don't use it for anything financial or anything business. It might be just to fill out forms possibly online, and you know you're going to get spam or whatever. That password, who cares if you ever change it, right? If somebody gets into it, you just do the reset thing, get reset back. But for banking accounts, they usually force you to anyway. Network accounts on most businesses today generally might have a 60, 90, 120 day, but still some of those don't. But even if they don't, I personally would recommend you changing your password every 90 days at least. Not the whole thing. You can change like the last 2 numbers or something. Just put 2 or 3 numbers. Usually 3 numbers is good on the end. If you put 3 numbers on the end of your password and then change that, you can get a lot out of 3 numbers, moving it around. You get a lot of play out of that one. And just keep moving those numbers around. Even 4 numbers is even better. And then using the same passwords for all accounts. That's a big one that people do a lot. That's a no-no. And then writing the password down, like putting the password underneath the mouse pad. Seen that before. Sticky note on the monitor. Password to safe. Password is payroll. Password to whatever. Okay, I've seen that, and so maybe you have too. But that's generally the first thing hackers look for, is those type of things, and that's generally in the human nature. Is people forget things, and so they don't want to forget them. They write it down on a piece of paper. Default accounts, another one. You want to make sure you get rid of any guest accounts on a machine, specifically a server, but even your client machines. Disable the guest account immediately on those machines. And although default accounts are intended to be deleted after installation, many of them are not, and that is true. Default accounts are often a first target. Generally, default accounts are always or a prime target for homeowners or for consumers. When they buy a new laptop, new desktop, they set up their OS, their default account's still going. And the defaults account generally don't have a password. You can just get into it, and some of them have admin access as well. So we want to make sure and disable those. So here are some really fancy, hard username and passwords, as you can see. In the 80s, one of the most popular passwords for network administrators to use was God. That was it. A lot of them used God as a password, believe it or not, and probably a lot of them still do. Like, I dare you, bring it. Come on, bring it. And that they just, that was common definitely. The next is backdoor, coming in through a backdoor on a network, an account that's secretly set up through an administrator's privilege or not, because an account is really easy to create if you have, say for instance, say you've downloaded a malware, or take it back, a Trojan application. Say it's a game. And the only purpose behind the scenes for this Trojan application to do that the user doesn't even see is to create a rogue access username, email the creator of this game, this malware, this Trojan, that username and password that has administrator rights. It's literally a 1-line command in code to create an administrator account with a password, another line to send that information to an email. So 2 lines of code, that's all it takes within a program. And once a program's installed on a computer, they are already behind the firewall. Generally, it's not going to be recognized by the antivirus because it's a valid application you said you wanted to install, maybe to all users. And now it's created this back door to where anyone, this hacker, can come in and remote access the machine easily. And these devices also a lot of times will have built-in, these programs will actually have built-in remote connectivity hooks like VNC, or they might have remote connectivity hooks into Microsoft's remote services, because if you don't turn on the ability for your machine to be remote controlled, it can't be remote controlled through Microsoft's service anyway. But if you install an openware software like VNC, and you know the password, and maybe it's a remote access VNC, meaning you can access it outside your network, really easy to get into. It bypasses all the Windows security. Backdoors can be created on network device as well in 2 ways. The network device can be infected by an attacker using a worm, Trojan horse I mentioned. And then the program of the software creates a backdoor into that device. Privilege escalation, this is basically where they come in through a software, network software, to gain access that normally wouldn't be given to them. And again, if you've installed a software or a person on your computer network's installed software that has a Trojan or a program in there to do privilege escalation, to create accounts, to transfer files, to search all of your computer for certain file names like confidential, like security, like password, those words, and then package them together and send them. That literally takes seconds to do, by the way, to scan a computer for those 3 words: confidential, security, and passwords. And believe me, those words I just mentioned, those file names, are the #1 file names used that people store those things in. Passwords, anything security, or even financial's another one, banking's another one. That's what they call the folder or the file or both, that name. So it doesn't take real long, or confidential for confidential files. Categories of attacks on networks include denial of service, spoofing, man in the middle, and replay attacks. Denial of service is an old school attack, one of the very first attacks that happen on networks, and basically it's where it blocks all the resources, shuts the service down, users can't get anywhere, can't do anything. Then distributed denial of service, DDoS, is a variant of DOS, but it actually attacks thousands or hundreds of thousands of computers called zombies. Zombie computers and called botnets, where basically you can attack. There's actually been countries hit by these, countries hit that are on the same internet network with botnets, and actually taken over the entire country for a period of time. And what they do with botnets is, say they have 1 million computers, all these resources of these 1 million computers are looked at as one resource. So memory, hard drive space, server information, processing information can all be harnessed for this type of botnet. And generally on botnets, on zombie computers, they work the hardest between 2 and 4 a.m. And why do you think they do that? Everybody's sleeping probably, right? So they don't even notice it. So through the day, between 4 a.m. and 2 a.m., nothing happens with this service. Nothing happens with the botnet. It just sits idle. But as soon as that time hits, it starts doing its work. And how many people in here turn their computer off every night? It's off. You do. How many does not turn your computer off every night? Okay. How many businesses that you work at, computers are on all night long? And I'm talking not just home, small businesses, insurance companies, whatever, but banks even leave their computers on all night long. So that's pretty scary. But governmental facilities leave their computers all night long. And people in the, used to, you were told to turn your computer off, right? Now you're told to keep it on because Windows does updates at night, usually 2, 3 in the morning. If you have an iPhone, iPad, Droid, whatever. When do they do their updates? 2, 3 in the morning. You plug it into your nightstand. It's on Wi-Fi, connected at nighttime. You wake up in the morning, it's got a new OS on it. They all do that now, every one of them. And so nobody shuts down their machines. Okay, and so this is a perfect playground for these type of attacks. This is basically just looking at a response of a DOS attack. And a DOS attack can happen non-maliciously. Here's how it would happen. Say you're a business and you do a TV spot and you say, okay, I want everybody to go to this website and you're going to get a free whatever. Many people hit it, guess what? It can bring the server down. It can deplete all the resources, bring it down. That's basically what a DOS attack does. Something's hitting that server all the time. Generally that something can be a program where every millisecond it's hitting that server, and that's all it does is ping that server over and over and over and over again until it brings it down. Now there is ways though to block that on all servers to not be pinged, that you cannot be pinged outside of your network, and you cannot be pinged by certain IP addresses. So maybe you have in that pool network admin machines that have laptops, you can be pinged by those. You can open those up, but everything else can't ping. And so if you can't ping a server or a web server, these type of attacks generally aren't a big deal anymore, but they used to be. That's actually can be done through router, generally. It can be done through switch, a number of different ways. Those rules can be set up. You can set up a rules through a router first, like on the front end, but it can more likely be set up through a Cisco switch, just a rule in a Cisco switch, and just set up those rules. So here we have an attacker that has a basically spoofed access point, and a legitimate user. They're both named, by the way, and it doesn't have it in the screen. Let's say both of them the same name, and you can do that. There's no reason you can't. Say the one valid one up there is called ABC Company, and the rogue one, he called his, well, I'm calling mine ABC Company too. Okay, I can call it that too. It's easy. And so the legitimate user goes, well, I can't get into that. I can't get into this. Why is there two of them? I can't get into one. Well, I'll hit this one. Well, it doesn't have security on that one. I usually have security. Oh, well. Is that what people do? Yeah, that's exactly what they do. Oh, well. They get in, they get on the computer, they get on their Facebook or whatever it is they're doing, the cat videos, and they start watching it, and there's like, in the home, all the time they're doing everything. Stuff's happening to the computer. Files are being searched, ports are being searched, back doors are being looked for, and so all through this type of thing here. Now the reason in this event here, you actually have an attacker creating, say, the same SSID as the original, and sending packets, flooding that access point to where it basically overtakes it. And maybe you've been in an access point scenario at home or at work to where there's so many users on it, you're like, I can't get in, or it's so slow, it's not worth even connecting, right? Everybody been there before? This guy over here is like downloading I don't know what, and I can't get him to check my my Gmail account, because it's so slow. And so in those cases, on access points, they're first come, first serve, and so whoever gets there first gets dedicated connection, dedicated bandwidth, because most of these out-of-the-box consumer access points, they're a lot better than they used to be. They have a built-in router and stuff in them, but they're not going to load balance. They're not going to determine, oh yeah, this person needs it more than the other one, or we're going to balance everybody out here. It's not going to do that. And so a lot of businesses buy consumer end Wi-Fi routers and then just set it up and put it on their network and think, yeah, we're good. And this is really easy. This actually happens quite a bit. Then we have this scenario here. You have an access point, and say here you have 4 clients, client A, B, C, and D, and you'll notice here each one of these clients are sending and receiving. In fact, the top 2 clients are sending and receiving data back and forth between each other. And we'll say these bottom 2 clients are having to wait constantly, and this really is a nuisance to the network, like I mentioned earlier, and it cannot get connectivity because it's having to wait so long. And depending on when you get in line, depends on how long you have to wait. Okay, when you hit that network, when you hit that Wi-Fi access point, depends on how long you have to wait. And so normally most users, in this scenario, it's not in here, but this is a perfect spot for a man-in-the-middle attack right here, because you've got these two at the bottom that are waiting forever. You throw another access point in there with the same name as a valid access point within the business. Do not put any password protection on it. And most users will just click on it and get on in. They won't think twice about it. And hackers know that. And you know that now. So the attacker sends a forged frame to a machine, to a laptop, to disassociate the valid access point frame, and then he forges it in such a way that eventually the laptop is now associating itself with the attacker machine and not the valid access point. Okay? And that's another way to do it. So spoofing, definition, impersonation. Pretends to be someone or something else by presenting false information. It's a variety of different spoofing attacks. Attacker may spoof an IP address so that her malicious actions would be attributed to a valid user. Attacker may spoof a network address with an address of a known trusted host. Attacker can set up an access point device and trick all wireless communication with that imposter device. It's called a rogue access point. And then man in the middle. This one basically intercepts legitimate communication and forges fictitious response to the sender. It can be passive or active. An active attack intercepts and alters the contents before they're sent to the recipient. Like on the lab we'll be doing in 2 weeks, or a week from this Thursday, it basically, when you guys log in as facebook.com, it fakes out the ARP table on the network in here to a new IP address to go to as a server, and that machine's the one running the web server that's running a fake website, Facebook website, and its whole job is to collect your username and passwords for just about a minute or two, because it'll fail when you try to log in. It'll purposely fail every time. After about 2 or 3 fails, and you can see it happening in the database, failing by collecting the data, you turn it off and put the table back the way it was, and they try to log in again by refreshing the browser. They think, well, I just forgot my password like everybody does. They get in. And they just now have all their passwords, their valid passwords, in the hands of an attacker. Now, you bring that to another step, bank accounts, credit card company accounts. You name it, this type of attack can be done on very easily. But I use Facebook in here because that's probably the most common that most students are used to, you're used to using. And you can see how that can also be used maliciously, because Facebook accounts now have, for businesses, could have sensitive information. They do spend money on their Facebook account for ads and driven ads. And Facebook, that's how they make money. And so it is tied a lot of times, Facebook accounts are tied a lot of times to financial resources. So it could have hidden in that account password information, account information to credit cards. And so it's not just a username, password, oh, I can deface their Facebook account and I can delete all their friends or something. That's not what they're after. They go in immediately to look for financial ties to your Facebook account. Because Facebook opened up last year the ability for normal users to now promote any post. If they have so many friends on your account or whatever, but I believe anyone can do it though. I don't think it's limited to any big group. You can pretty much be anyone. Pay $7, $5 and promote your post, right? Well, in order to do that, you got to put a credit card in Facebook, and it stores that information in the store. And so, not real difficult to go in. If you were to have a username and password of a Facebook account, you can see how hackers can go in and begin to thwart information and be able to hijack someone's financial information on Facebook. And if nothing else, just to destroy, go in and change the amount that you're paying for an ad from $3 a day to say $400 a day, whatever, okay? And go from, say, because you can target from 1,000, one user all the way up to millions of users a day to be targeted for your ad. And so you can see how that could wipe someone out pretty quick. Man in the middle, you've got the machine in the middle that is basically becoming the server to computer A. That's what it's doing, okay? And the way the network sees it, the man in the middle is the server. After the attack has occurred, the ARP tables have been poisoned, and you'll learn about that on Thursday, or next week from this Thursday. The ARP tables have been poisoned, then this machine in the middle is the server according to the network. It sees it as a server. Then lastly, the replay attack. This is basically similar to the passive man in the middle. This one just captures data and is used at a later time. This one's actually used quite a bit. It's a simple relay that would involve the man in the middle capturing login credentials between computer and server. A more sophisticated attack takes advantage of communication between device and server, and administrative messages that contain specific requests are frequently sent between a network and server. So what this one does is basically finds information, captures it, shuts it off, and then leaves the network. And then, collates the data somewhere else. And this is done millions of times a day, every day, especially in big cities, but probably in Rockford as well, in areas of hotspots, free hotspots generally. In fact, when you drive anywhere in Rockford downtown or any community that has businesses, you will see a lot of times Wi-Fi hotspots pop up that says free Wi-Fi or whatever. Those are generally, in some cases, rogue accounts for people to connect to. And a lot of times you can't connect to them. People try to connect to them, and during that process of trying to connect to them to get internet connection, well, in fact, they connect to them, but they can't get on the internet. And hackers know if they get on the internet, a lot of times they go in, do what they want, and then get out. Folks will, because they're not really for sure about this Wi-Fi network. But if they connect to a Wi-Fi network and they cannot get internet access, they keep playing with it longer to try to connect. Human nature, they want to figure out how to connect to it to get that free Wi-Fi that it says it is, right? And during that whole process, the hackers are actually gathering more data than what they would gather with a just internet connection for like 5 minutes or something like that. And so replay attack is very popular, and then it basically attacks, the network attack methods can be protocol based, or as I already mentioned in here, wireless based. And so what we're going to learn on Thursday is basically how to take this Thursday we're going to learn how to use the